When that massive bridge in Baltimore came crashing down, we all saw this epic, unbelievable disaster, right? But what if I told you the real story, the entire story, comes down to something incredibly small? A single, tiny failure. It sounds crazy. How does something so big collapse because of something so small? Well, we're gonna get into it.
I mean, really think about that for a second. You've got the ship that's nearly 1,000 feet long, a bridge stretching over 1.5 miles, and the whole thing comes crashing down because of one loose wire. It almost doesn't compute. But today, we're going to unpack exactly how that happened.
All right, let's set the scene. We're going back to March 26th, 2024. It was a day that started out completely normal, but it would end as a national tragedy.
So you have this enormous container ship, the Dali. It completely loses control and just plows right into one of the main support piers of the bridge. The impact, it was just devastating. In what felt like an instant, this huge steel structure just crumbled, gone, right into the river.
And here's where the story gets both heartbreaking and, well, almost miraculous. There was a real terrible human cost. A road crew was working on the bridge that night, and tragically, 6 of them lost their lives. But it could have been so much worse. The ship's crew and the authorities on the ground acted incredibly fast. They managed to stop traffic just moments before the impact. That quick thinking, without a doubt, saved countless other lives.
So that brings us to the big question, the one everyone was asking. How on earth does a modern, massive ship like this just lose control? The answer investigators eventually found: it's almost hard to believe.
Right away, the theories started flying. Was it a navigation error, major engine trouble, some kind of human mistake? The job of sifting through all that noise and finding the real answer fell to the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB.
And here it is. This is the smoking gun. It all came down to a single loose electrical wire. Can you believe that? Turns out, a little piece of plastic banding, the kind they use for labels, was physically blocking the wire from being pushed all the way in. It created this tiny, inadequate connection and open circuit that would kick off the entire disaster.
And you have to appreciate how hard this was to find. The NTSB chair, Jennifer Homendy, had this perfect analogy for it. She said it was like hunting for a loose rivet on the Eiffel Tower. Think about it. A ship like the Dali has miles and miles of wiring, thousands of connections. Pinpointing that one single flaw was just a monumental, needle-in-a-haystack kind of job.
Okay, so we have the cause, but how does one loose wire lead to a total catastrophe? It's all about the chain reaction it set off. Let's walk through exactly what happened, step by step.
It starts with that wire, right? That little open circuit. Well, that tiny fault was enough to trip a critical electrical breaker. And just like that, boom, the ship goes dark. The first blackout hits, and the Dali loses everything. The main engine, the steering, all control, gone. It was now just this massive 1,000-foot unguided missile drifting straight for the bridge.
And you really have to feel for the crew here. They were completely powerless. The investigation was clear. The pilots, the whole team on the bridge, they did everything they possibly could. They dropped anchor, they tried to steer, but with no power and being that close to the bridge, there was just no stopping it. The ship's momentum was just too much. But, the loose wire is really only half the story. It explains why the ship lost control. But to understand why the bridge collapsed so completely, so spectacularly, we need to talk about scale. See, the Key Bridge was built back in 1977, and you have to remember, the ships back then were just different. They were way smaller than the giants we have today. The bridge was a feat of engineering for its time, but it just wasn't designed to survive a direct hit from a behemoth like the Dali.
And we know this for a fact because history gives us a perfect comparison. Get this. Back in 1980, another, much smaller ship, the Blue Nagoya, also lost power and hit the very same bridge. And what happened? A little bit of damage, but nothing major. The bridge is fine. But the Dali? It's almost 10 times bigger. It didn't just damage the bridge, it completely annihilated it.
And this really drives the point home, doesn't it? The difference in size is just staggering. The sheer mass and momentum of today's container ships have totally changed the game. It's a whole new level of risk for our aging infrastructure. The forces involved are just on another planet compared to what these bridges were designed for.
And that's the thing. This wasn't just a Baltimore tragedy. This was a massive, nationwide wake-up call. It forced everyone to ask a really uncomfortable question that goes way beyond one city or one port.
So what happened next? Well, the NTSB didn't waste any time. They immediately fired off letters to 30 other bridge owners all across the country. The message was simple and urgent. You need to look at your own bridges right now and figure out if they could survive a hit from one of these massive ships. They were basically shouting from the rooftops that this is not just a Baltimore problem.
And what they discovered was, frankly, a little terrifying. It turns out a lot of these bridge owners were probably completely unaware of the risks they were facing. And the craziest part, there's been official guidance telling them to perform these kinds of risk assessments for years. It just wasn't happening. Now, if there's a silver lining, it's that this disaster forced everyone to pay attention. All 30 of those owners have since responded and are taking action.
So, all of this leaves us with one final and really important question. The story of the Dali and the Key Bridge, it isn't really about a single loose wire, is it? It's about a much bigger problem, a fundamental mismatch between our 20th century infrastructure and the colossal scale of 21st century global trade. And it forces us all to ask, as these ships keep getting bigger and bigger, are our bridges keeping up?